I know Karen may be running a little late today. So if you could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. We'll start with you, Ann.
Ann Pierce. Rebecca Johnson.
Pam McLeod.
Kara Locke.
Tim Broderick.
John MacArthur.
Heidi Duford.
And agenda review.
I move the agenda as written. Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the minutes from November 8th.
I move the approval of the minutes from November 8th.
I'll second that.
Any discussion or corrections?
I didn't see any. You weren't here, so you wouldn't know.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't know. All those in favor?
Aye.
All abstain? And public input on agenda items.
Looks like I got fancy timing today. Jason English. I just wanted to go over the active COVID numbers again, even though it's the same song, nobody's listening. I also would like to make it known too that our governor just went on a national TV show, news program, and said that the reason why he's not going to be imposing mask mandates is because, well, quite frankly, we're all living our lives. We're all having Thanksgiving, celebrating Halloween, and everybody's doing their thing, yet the only place I see anybody masking anybody is here at school. It's pretty ridiculous. But again, since I've been bringing this to you, we have doubled in the amount of current cases of contracted COVID-19 for 0 to 19 years of age. We've added about 20 cases of hospitalizations, still 0 deaths. I am curious to know if there's any side effects, God willing that this doesn't happen, but are we liable at all if any of the kids between the ages of 5 and 11 die from us giving shots on school property? Is that something that we're liable for? Nothing.
We don't typically answer questions, but I'm pretty sure the parents sign a release form.
Yeah, the vaccination clinics are being run by the state public health network. We're just giving them space. So we don't have any liability in that? Because I know that Pfizer and all the pharmaceutical companies are not liable. The government's never liable about any of this stuff. So it's going to fall on employers, and it's going to fall on places that are actually doing, the vaccination. So that's all I want to do right now is let you know that COVID's still going around, and the only place that is masking kids is schools. Okay? It's absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, how you doing, Steve? I'd like to input, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Dalton Flannery. I was here a few months ago, and I'm going to sound like an echo chamber, this gentleman here. But, active COVID cases to non-active COVID cases, COVID's not going anywhere anytime soon. Our children are not going to get affected. We gotta take these masks off, and I'd like to cite the Berlin School District here in New Hampshire. The parents actually fought the school board and won, and basically threatened their job, saying, hey, if you don't change this, we're coming for your job. And that's what I'm going to say here tonight. I'm coming for whoever is going to keep this going. I'm coming for your job. I'm running for school board, so I want to make that known. and first act of duty when I get elected is I'm going to vote to get these masks taken out of school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess we have to do this again, so. So to correct the numbers that are being thrown
Steve,
around here.
Would you just state your name?
I'm sorry, Steve
Thank
McKnight,
you.
Alton. So in the last several weeks, since we've actually set some new records here in New Hampshire, we've got the highest number of daily cases, got the highest number of people currently infected with COVID. We're over 10,000 now. We've got the highest hospitalization rate since the pandemic has started. We've got a 8.7% positivity rate on testing. New cases are running 637 per 100,000. And let's combine this with the fact that, keep in mind that Belknap County actually has the lowest vaccination rate in the state. So there's another, hey, we're number one. I'm not going to sit here and keep having this debate over whether or not masks mitigate the risk, because anybody who would actually argue that they don't, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You need help if that's what you feel, because the thing is that you do, and
Guys,
excuse me,
guys.
it's my time.
Hey, he's insulted me.
You had your
was
chance
I-
to
was I
speak.
referring
He
to you?
gets his chance to speak, please.
I think that, yep.
Stop talking, please. If masks didn't mitigate risk, then why would we use them as a measure to mitigate risk when we have an outbreak? We've had 2 separate outbreaks in the school. What do we do? What's the first step we do when we have an outbreak? We implement masking. And it mitigates risk, and the number of cases go down. There was a study in Maricopa County in Arizona in which they found that you are 3.5 times more likely to have outbreaks in the schools when universal masking is not implemented in a school system that has HVAC systems unlike ours. I don't really know what else to say. When we started this, and we had this discussion 3 months ago, we were at 1/3 of the active cases then. We were at 1/4 of the active number of hospitalizations. We have more cases, and we are arguing about doing less. Every time we have this conversation, it gets worse, and we want to do less. I wish somebody could explain it to me. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason,
I didn't get my 3 minutes, so I'm gonna use the rest of my 3 minutes.
I'll give you 1 minute, Jason.
That's very kind of you.
One session per person.
So, I think it's also very key to know that since we want to play this game with vaccinations, Vermont is actually in the same predicament as New Hampshire is. And Vermont is actually the most vaccinated state in the country with 75% vaccination. Here in New Hampshire, we're around, depending upon the source, 55 to 65%. New Hampshire says 55, CDC says 65. And yeah, I do take it personally that I need help with understanding this. We have had the same masking policy for the entire school year. We have not changed. There has been more cases in the 2 masked schools than in the unmasked school. I don't understand why we're having this debate when I'm the one that needs help. Let me tell you, I am also interested in running for school board. I'm not interested in your seat, young lady. I am interested in your seat because your seat is the seat that will change the course. It's not just about mitigating or any of that. Our children are not at risk. The only risk they are at is the policies that we're putting in place of them. 42 veterans are dead daily since the beginning of this pandemic, comparative to 22. The Surgeon General just came out and said that the active cases of depression and anxiety and suicides since the beginning of this pandemic from ages 10 to 24 have gone up 57%. Does anybody care about that just because it's not COVID? I am not being unrealistic. I am being empathetic to every other situation that life throws at us. And right now, we have many people sitting here without masks on, some of them who vote for masks, and it's absolutely ridiculous to sit here and think that you have some sort of power over these children like this. I am interested in getting rid of these COVID crap, and I'm interested in getting rid of this political crap that you're putting onto our students. Bring kids into the school. Stop pushing families out of the school.
Can I make a motion that we have this gentleman removed? He's obviously not stable, and I don't feel comfortable in here.
Would anybody else like to speak who hasn't already spoken? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public input. All right, Tim, we have a presentation.
So, this is about enrollment. Let's see. There we go. So, this is the enrollment at Alton Central School over the last 15 years. You had, sorry, I'm going to my copy so I can see the numbers. Over 600 students enrolled in the 2006-2007 school year. For the last 4 years, it's been relatively stable, around 425 to 435, 440 students. I do project that to decline a little bit in the coming years, but it's relatively level now. However, it's significantly less than it was. Enrollment at the high school is also down over the same period of time. Not quite as much on a percentage basis, 26.5%, but pretty close. These should be concerns for any school system. This is common in rural schools across the country today. It's happening all over New Hampshire. It is a function of birth rate. Yep.
I don't think the slides are advanced.
Oh, yeah, sorry, go to up, please. So the high school I talked about, please go to the next one, sorry about that. Okay, so these are concerns for all schools, particularly rural schools right now. This is a function of birth rate in all rural areas, not only in New Hampshire but across the country. I think it's exacerbated here in Alton due to the real estate market, which is makes it a challenge for families with young children to move here and to purchase property. So as the number of students in a school declines, because some of the costs associated with running a school are not calculated on a per pupil basis, the cost, for example, of a principal, sorry, John, is what it is regardless of the number of students in a school. The cost of heating this building with this many square feet is likely to rise over time, but at least it is what it is. Again, not a function of whether there are 10 kids in a classroom or 20 kids in a classroom. There are some fixed costs associated with running any school that simply don't change by much. And this means that the per pupil cost of operating a school rises. That results frequently in pressure on property taxpayers, and it gets attention from taxpayers and from budget committees. The other negative effect of declining enrollment is that once boards or voters or budget committees start to look at cost cutting, that can have negative effects on the breadth and quality of curricular and extracurricular offerings. It also, there are some effects of just not having as many kids in a school. Smaller schools have a hard time fielding a basketball team or an A team and a B team, a varsity team and a JV team. It's hard to have a play when 4 kids show up to do a play versus 20. Next slide, sorry. Thanks for the reminder. This is a history and projection. The projections are rough, but it's what I've been able to do so far of the per pupil cost at this school. So go back to 2011-12, about 10 years ago, under $15,000. Yes, some of this is inflation, but these increases are far higher than the rate of inflation. And this is the effect of declining enrollment with what have not been extraordinary budget increases in this school. On the next slide, I have given you the same information, but for Prospect Mountain High School, because that comes into play by the end of this discussion. This projects out farther into the future simply because it's easier to project high school enrollment than it is to project elementary school enrollment. And trying to predict what an elementary school enrollment is going to look like requires thinking about birth rate. That's hard to do beyond right now. And, but there are some educated guesses we can make, particularly around the effects of the real estate market. And I think that's a really significant issue here in Alton and for this school. On the next slide, I begin a little bit of public information about a conversation that started with a citizen's petition in the town of Milton back in March. The residents of Milton voted to compel their school board to put together an exploration committee to think about whether or not they should continue to operate their middle high school, Newt Middle High School, versus shutting it down and looking to tuition their students out to another town. More about that on the next slide. The exploration committee that Milton put together contacted Prospect Mountain High School and Alton Central School. We had some conversations over the summer, shared a little bit of information with them, and on September 22nd, that committee recommended to the Milton School Board that they should in fact close Newt and consider sending their students elsewhere on a tuition agreement or more than one tuition agreement. And that's important, that distinction between one and more than one, because the committee went a little bit beyond the mission they had been given by the school board, and they further recommended that the Milton School Board should explore whether or not it was possible to come up with tuition agreements for their high school students at Prospect Mountain and for their middle school students here at Alton Central School. I know you weren't looking, but this came to ACS, and I know you board members know that you've had some preliminary discussions over the last several weeks. 2 members of the Milton School Board have been assigned this task and have been in communication with 2 designees of this board and 2 designees of the high school board. Just for the sake of providing this information publicly, this is approximately, next slide, sorry, and then one more, sorry. Just for the sake of modeling, so people understand, this is approximately what the enrollment of the high school could look like if a tuition agreement existed with Milton. And then on the next slide, some comments about that, starting with the fact that Prospect Mountain High School was designed and built to hold over 800 students, and therefore the building that's there is adequate for something like this if it should come about. On the next slide, I note that the joint board at Prospect, which has been experienced, as I showed you earlier, its own declining enrollment over the last 15 years, the board has tried to maintain the broadest course offerings and quality extracurricular activities possible. That has resulted in some small class sizes, maybe even a little smaller than you would love. Small classes are good, but there are limits to everything. But the point is that because the board has maintained these things, if you were to bring in additional students to the high school, there would probably only be minimal operating cost increases. It wouldn't cost a lot more to run that high school. On the next slide, this gives you an idea what the total population at Alton Central School would look like with about 100 additional middle school students. But there are some very important notes about this on the next slide. It's very important to understand that even though at one time there were 500 students in this building, K through 8, the school was using modular classrooms at that time, and those students were distributed among all 9 grade levels. Bringing in 100 students and putting them all in 3 grades doesn't work the same way. And I am certain there's no appetite on this board or in this community to go back to the days of 24 students in a class and modular classrooms out back. So that doesn't work. Therefore, if you were to consider something like this, you need to expand in some way. You'd have about twice as many middle school students in the building if something like this were to happen. I don't know if it's realistic. However, considering the operating costs and the cost of some kind of expansion like that, you know, it would cost more to run the place. So it's important, on the next slide, it's important that there would be no negative impacts first to the class sizes, the range of offerings, the quality of instruction, and the services that are being offered here. You certainly wouldn't want to create a situation where you felt as if, or stakeholders, parents, students felt like the school had deteriorated in any way. Second, if you entertain a tuition agreement, it would have to be cost neutral. It would have to pay for itself. And that would include any construction that was necessary to accommodate a bigger middle school, plus operating costs for additional teachers or whatever else was necessary. It would all have to be paid for by the revenue coming in under that agreement. And then finally, and this is important, because otherwise why would you even consider something like this, even if this is a long shot, why would you even entertain it for a moment if there weren't going to be a net reduction in property tax assessment to the citizens of Alton? So that's a necessary condition. It would happen in this proposed case if this could come together, because the Prospect Mountain component, because there aren't a lot of increased costs there, that incoming revenue would be divided between Alton and Barnstead and would have a lowering impact on tax assessment. And then finally, last slide, if there were to be agreements like this, the high school agreement would be contingent on the middle school agreement. The middle school agreement would be contingent on voter approval, potentially of a construction bond. And just to make it even worse, all of this has to be, anything that needs to be put in a warrant article would need to be decided in the next 3 or 4 weeks, because both Milton and Alton are SB2 towns, and you have until January 7th to recommend your warrant articles. So that's an overview of this situation. You know, to be fair to the folks on the Milton board, you know, we've answered their calls at the SAU office. You all have answered them personally in some cases and met with them. Where this goes from here, I think, remains to be seen. But if it's going to go anywhere, it's critical, because of the short timeline, that you have some kind of a public conversation. So that was the purpose of this presentation. Whether you proceed in a real meaningful way with this much farther or not, I know remains to be seen. But that's where it is. You know, I guess the only thing I would point out, you know, there are so many moving pieces that kind of hinge on each other in this situation that it does seem maybe a little too hard. We'll see. But the enrollment situation here is what it is. It is not going to change in the near future. Again, birth rate, the reality of the real estate market here. This is likely to be a school of 400 to 430 students for quite a while. Furthermore, some of our larger classes at the moment are in the older grades. So there could be 375, 380 students here in 4 or 5 years without really anything changing. With all the same students continuing to enroll year after year, this school doesn't get bigger in terms of enrollment. So something to be aware of. That's that. We have another one. We have 2 things tonight under presentations.
I just want to pause for comments, and I think we're going to discuss this further in non-public, because it is under the non-public qualifications. But does the board have anything they'd like to ask or comment in public?
Do we have any idea what their elementary school is like in Milton? I mean, how big it is?
We'd just be talking middle school, right?
Right,
Yeah,
but
but
I
it's
didn't
not
know,
big
I
enough.
mean, it's not big enough for K through 8, obviously. Would it be big
It's the
enough
first
for-
question I asked them when they called.
What about K through 6, you know what I mean? Fewer students here, more students there. I don't know, it's just a thought.
That's a good question.
Because not all 6th graders are considered middle school. Sometimes they're self-contained. So,
It's
if we
interesting.
just took in 7th and 8th grade, it would be fewer students to put in our school. It's just a thought I had when I was watching this.
Other questions?
No, I mean, I think it's a interesting proposal. I think that, to prevent programs being cut or, or to continue to offer programs, it's certainly something to discuss in addition to property taxes, but.
And we've talked about this briefly before, but even the per pupil costs, I mean, we're getting up to what, $23,000 a year? You can go to a private school for that, so that's also, we've talked about that, something to take into consideration, so we'd wanna keep that down as much as we could.
Yeah, to Ann's point, one of our strengths in Alton has been the variety of programs we've been able to offer to our kids. I think not a lot of K through 8 schools can offer what we do here.
Good for now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Lori Eckberg is here
thank you.
to talk about, do we have handouts? Do they already in their packets? To talk about the 2 programs, I think.
I'll just give it to your copy now.
Sure, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Lori Eckberg. I am the school social worker here at Alton Central School. Been here, this is my 4th year. I wanted to talk about 2 programs. I wanted to talk about the End Hunger program. I don't know if you guys are aware of that program that we have here. So that program, the idea behind it, End Hunger, End 68 Hours of Hunger, essentially it's to help mitigate food insecurities for families on the weekend, essentially. So the 68 hours from Friday afternoon to Monday morning. Obviously, you guys are aware kids get free breakfast and lunch here at school. And our lower socioeconomic status families get that even not during COVID. There's an application process. But what our idea behind the program is to make sure kids have food on the weekends, families that don't have enough resources. So we have currently we pack about 18 bags a week. We provide students with a bag of food to take home for the weekend. It provides them breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the weekend. So we do about 18 bags a week. We order the food, we stock that food, pack those bags. We have kind of a rotation so they get a variety of different foods that we try to provide them. So it's 18 bags a week for 12 families. And if we ever hear of a family that has some food insecurities, I reach out personally to try to discuss the program and other ways that I can help as a social worker, connect them to other resources, the food pantry, things like that. But we offer that to our families as a resource. And so I just wanted to put it out there as something that we have here to help families. Food insecurities are increasing. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. Our numbers are going up. They're, due to COVID and just grocery prices going up. I know my grocery bill's gone up. I'm assuming yours has too. And so it's definitely difficult. So there is that program that I just wanted you to be aware of, and it is something that I think is super helpful for our community. It's not something that I think in this community many people think about as much because we are very fortunate in Alton. Our real estate costs and everything else play into it. But we still have a lot of children that end up going hungry. So it's important.
Lori, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Are you looking for volunteers, or how are you doing on sort of staffing all of that?
So at this point, we had volunteers in the past that we used, and then COVID hit. And so we have just shifted gears. It's been a little bit more difficult ordering food. Some of that has been difficult. We don't currently use the food pantry because you have to drive all the way to Manchester, that sort of stuff. So those details have been more difficult without volunteers. If in the future we'll get to volunteers, I don't
Okay.
think we're ready for that yet.
Okay.
You know.
And donations, I just want to mention, that's a nonprofit, so
Mhm.
you can go online and just Google it, I think, and look for N68, and I think it's out of Dover.
It is
that
out of
right?
Dover, and it's actually across the country. There's some N68 Hours of Hunger in Florida and different places. You can donate directly to Alton
Okay.
through that website. You just pick your
great.
site, so you can donate directly to us. Like we have several people that donate to us on a monthly basis. It's a tax write-off because it's a nonprofit. We also, most of our donations, so we run the program, I should have mentioned this, but we run the program, it's all off of donations. So we get donations, currently here in Alton, we get a lot of individual donations. When COVID hit, we were flooded with donations almost immediately, which was really nice. We did a food drive here, and people were very, very generous. people in Alton are very generous. So we get those individual donations. We get donations from the local yoga studio. They did a yoga class and they collected money, and she got money from people all over the place that were following her yoga, online yoga stuff, and she gave us quite a bit of money. The American Legion gives us money on a regular basis to help fund that program. Hannaford's, they do the bag programs at Hannaford's, things like that. So Hannaford's has a couple different ways to give money to the program as well. So that's where we get most of the financial backing for it, and we're very fortunate. We're pretty steady in Alton.
Great.
So that's nice. Switching gears to the other reason, the main reason I wanted to come. I am currently on the board of a cooperative called KIND. So you have the handout in front of you. It stands for Kids in Need. And the idea behind it is a group of people actually from the Governor Wentworth area. And they created this because they wanted to help support students in need in their area. And so they got together and created this idea of this nonprofit to help support kids for needs that aren't otherwise supported by different agencies in the community. So there's agencies for fuel assistance, there's agency for certain things around, but there's lots of gaps. And so the idea behind this was to get local people helping local people. So your money would go directly to your community. So there's a student at your high school that needs driver's ed and they can't afford it. They can't get a job if they don't have a driver's license, right? It complicates things, and poverty spirals at that point. And so their idea behind it was to get people around that had resources to help others in need in their community. It makes for a better community. People are happier. You get more stability. It helps everyone. So, and you know directly where your money's going. There's no overhead, any of that. So 100% of it obviously goes right back to the community. The way it works, they have what I call validators in all of the different schools. So it would be your social worker, your school counselor, a nurse. It could be anything like that. It could be a doctor, a dentist, something like that. So it's a professional that would kind of vet a need. So you can see on here they list some of the things that they've done. The thing that I like about it is there's no limits. It's amazing. So in Alton, so anyways, I became aware of G-Wave. That's what they called themselves before. They met me, and I weaseled my way in there because there's a need here as well, and got to know them. And so they invited me to be on the board and said they wanted to grow, and so they've included Alton. It made no sense to include Alton if you didn't include Barnstead, because all of our kids go to the same high school. And so they were graciously willing, with my support, to grow this agency to include Alton and Barnstead, where previously it was just the Governor Wentworth School District. So that happened last year. So they had to rebrand. So you'll see G-Wave on the right, KIND on the left. We had to rebrand the whole thing, come up with a new name for the organization because we added Alton and Barnstead to it. So that's wonderful. Again, it's all volunteer. So the way it works is if I have a family that I'm working with that's in need of something, I reach out, and it's kind of a listserv type of agency. So they have an email list. And if there's a need, for example, I have a family that's in need of a bunk bed. Well, that's kind of hard to come across. You put it out to your listserv. Somebody probably has a bunk bed in their house that they were looking to get rid of and just didn't know what to do with. It's been sitting around. So they put those kinds of asks out there. And if you're on the listserv, oh, we have a bunk bed. I was looking for somewhere great to donate that. And so it just facilitates locals helping locals. When that doesn't happen, they also have funding sources, volunteers, people that donate money, or people that will say, well, I don't have a bunk bed, but I'll buy a bunk bed for this family. So currently we have a family in Alton that was in need of a bunk bed. They had 2 children sleeping in bed together. Mom really wanted to get a bunk bed for these children. Mom got sick, missed work quite a bit. It was going to be the Christmas present to the kids, and she no longer had the money to pay for the bunk bed. So that was coming off of the Christmas gifts for the kids. And I actually was in conversation with her about other things. It came up, and I said, let me see what I can do. I put it out to KIND. They got a brand new bunk bed shipped to their house. Mattress, bedding, the whole 9 yards. This mom is over the moon excited about the fact that she can do this for her kids with help. But the community helped her, and now they're going to get bunk beds for Christmas. And it just makes everybody, these kids don't have to sleep in the same bed. It's going to be a twin over a full. They can have their own space in their house. So it's given me chills because I just feel like it helps and it helps people feel appreciated. It just overall makes the community happier and healthier. So that is just one example. Winter clothing, I mean, I could go on and on about the things that they've done for Alton and Barnstead just this year alone. I actually think I brought some of them, but we've had, so we call them asks. So I put out an ask to them, and then they follow up on it. And maybe someone got my sheet, because I don't, oh wait, here it is. So, skiing. I mean, many of these kids here want to do the ski program, but it can be cost prohibitive. So they've paid for ski passes. They've paid for transportation for families. They do ask the family can pay, tries to pay some, pays as much as they can, depending on what they can do. Lots of winter clothing, lots of boots, gloves, hats. Oftentimes what we'll do is I've sat down with kids and kind of shopped online with them, which is empowering to the kids as well. And then we just send a link to ask, and they put it out, and it gets shipped here, and we get it to the families. So that's kind of cool too. A lot of clothing, sneakers. We have one youth at the high school that got a job working outside but didn't have a warm enough coat. Got a nice Carhartt jacket for him to wear. So things like that. So it's a great organization, and my concern, and partly why I'm here, is we have a lot of people in the Governor Wentworth area that are on this listserv, and not as many in Alton. And we are servicing way more people. We are putting in most of the asks, Alton and Barnstead. So what I'm trying to do is get the word out there about KIND and also grow the listserv. So I'd love to have more people in the Alton community that could possibly help in any of these situations to get on this listserv. So selfishly, I'm here for that reason as well, because
Awesome.
I'm just
I'll
trying to
help
get the
spread
word out.
Yeah. And how do you do that? Do you just go to the website and sign up, or?
You know what, to be honest, I don't know that answer. You can always email me, and I will figure that out, and get people on the listserv. And I want to get as many people talking to as many people in the community so it grows. And there is the website. They're switching it from, it says Governor Wentworth right now, but it's switching over to KIND. And there is a place on there as well to donate and all that sort of stuff. And so when you get on the listserv, they send out a monthly email with asks. Sometimes they send out random asks, and you read it, and you're like, oh, nope, not in a place to help right now, or, oh, yeah, that is something I can help with. So it's all by choice. They also do evenings of awareness. We did afternoon of awareness earlier this year, where they talk about poverty and what it looks like and what they're doing, just to raise the awareness for the organization as well. Any questions of how that works, or?
So go to this website?
Yep.
Or is it, okay.
Yep, go to the website, and it redirects you to it, because it was G-Wave and now it's KIND.
Okay.
So, but yeah, you go to the website and it's on there. I haven't looked at it recently to see if you can actually get on the listserv. I'm assuming you can. And if not, you can always reach out to me.
Okay.
With friends, family, relatives, neighbors, anybody that would like to be on the listserv, shoot me their email.
This is fantastic.
And what is your email? Is it on here?
leckberg@sau72.org.
All right, sorry.
Like
what?
everybody else's.
What is it?
No, so it's L for Lori. It's E, as in Edward, K as in King, B as in Bob, ERG.
It's on the bottom, Rebecca.
Yeah, and it's on the KIND thing, because I'm down there at the bottom.
The thing?
No, it's like, so this is her name.
Oh.
Is that
And then it's just the SAU 72.
Yep, so
Okay.
it's, yeah,
You can
L
also find
Eckberg.
her in the staff section with a picture on our website
Okay,
as well.
that's all I need.
And that actually, that link is wonderful on the website,
just
because
like
I get random emails from people from that. You can click right on that and send me an email. You don't
Okay.
even have to put in my address. It's really easy
Thank you.
and nice, so.
That's
Any-
a great program, and it reminds me a lot of the Buy Nothing group on Facebook too, and so I have some ideas. I don't know if you're aware of that group, but I can
never
get
heard
you connected to the facilitators of that
Okay,
group.
that'd be wonderful.
I have other ideas about how to get the word out, so I'll just shoot you an email.
That'd be
tomorrow.
perfect. We can sit down sometime, or we can
Yeah,
email
yeah.
back and forth. That'd be
Yeah.
wonderful. I'm always looking for that.
That's great.
It's a wonderful group. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you for coming, Lori.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, any community member, so you can reach out to me or to the website. It's a great organization. So any of your friends and family or relatives that want to help as well?
She overshadowed you, Tim.
Good.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, take care.
Thank you.
Okay, informational items. We have financials.
The only thing I want to bring your attention to is the 2600 and building and maintenance. There were a couple of lines there that are it looks like way over budget. I just wanted to let you know that, like the repairs and maintenance, that has to do with the boiler project. They're still way under budget, if you take out the boiler project expense.
Okay.
And then there's, plastic dividers that we had purchased, for the equipment new, that also will be coming out. So it looks worse than it is. And if there's any questions, that's all I had.
Thanks, Heidi. Any questions on the report?
I don't have any.
No. Okay. Okay. Enrollments. I mean, we just heard a lot about enrollment. Looks like we're up four students from last year. Just for your information, she has the cover sheet of the DA magazine in here. Superintendent's report.
Everybody's favorite part of the meeting, I'm sure. Let's talk about the pandemic. I handed out some little packets. Tonight I am going to try to give you a different conversation about this than you've had in the past. I offer this as a possibility for your consideration. As you know, we have had 2 outbreaks. During the first one, there were 15 active cases when DHHS made the determination that we had an outbreak. The second time, there were 11 active cases when DHHS made that determination. After December 3rd, we returned to the partial face covering requirement the same way we started the year. Face coverings are required on buses, of course, due to federal mandate, but also in the school in common areas, in the hallways, any place where physical distance or some other mitigation is not available. However, at desks in classrooms, with desks spaced 6 feet apart and some plexiglass barriers in place, we are allowing students to remove their face coverings if they wish to do so. Parents have the option of notifying teachers if they want their students to not do so. At the same time that we returned to the partial face covering protocols, I relaxed the extremely restrictive protocols that had been established for indoor winter athletics. Unfortunately, we were getting ready for the sports season during the DHHS declared outbreak, and talking to other schools that would be coming here to compete, it was necessary to be extremely restrictive. Now that we're out of that condition, I was able to relax. We have spectators. We've made face coverings optional in the stands for adults in there. It's different to be in the gym with the tall ceiling and all that space versus 150 kids in the cafeteria, for example, during the school day. I've given you updated charts here that indeed show that the new cases per 100,000 rate in Belknap County is well over 1,000. At this point, active cases in Belknap County are at a new high, around 418. Active cases in Alton are not at a high for the fall, but they're close, with 40 reported at least by DHHS. There are some new significant developments, and this is where the conversation for you to have tonight, I think, can change a little bit if you want it to. First of all, and I'll remind you all, board, that one of the main reasons, if not the reason, that the protocols at the high school have been what they are all year and have been consistent is that vaccination was available to high school students last spring. Vaccination has not been available to children in elementary schools until November 3rd, and now it is, and has been for over a month. As of a few weeks ago, on November 19th, all adults, not just those at higher risk, became eligible for booster shots. Indeed, I think I heard something earlier about the governor's appearance on CBS Sunday morning. I saw that as well. And the governor had a lot to say about vaccination and boosters as the number one way to mitigate the effects and the spread of the pandemic. There are now opportunities for anyone who chooses to get vaccinated or who chooses to have their children vaccinated or to receive boosters to do so. By sometime in January, and you can sort of, it's hard to evaluate the ease of making appointments and scheduling these things right now. I've heard a lot of different things. We've done what we can by allowing the Public Health Network to host vaccination sites in our buildings to the degree that they're able to, but they're not able to a great degree. We have one clinic scheduled right now. It's not even in this building. It's over in the Barnstead building, although it is open to people from Alton if they were able to get appointments, which filled up pretty quickly. We had some more appointments added today and reopened that for additional registrations. I don't know if it's filled again or not. Nevertheless, there are ways for those who wish to do so to go get vaccinated or boosted. We know that anybody, including those vaccinated in full and with boosters, can get coronavirus and transmit it. At the same time, breakthrough cases, those cases of COVID-19 among those who have been vaccinated, tend to be less severe. Tend to be. There are no guarantees here. We're talking about odds and statistics, not guarantees. And along those lines, by the same token, cases among children tend to be less severe than cases among older people. The governor has been telling us that his strategy, this goes back to last spring, that his administration's strategy was not necessarily to reduce total infections, but rather to try to employ multiple levels of mitigation that would reduce rates of hospitalization and ultimately the number of deaths. During the current surge, and I've provided two charts here so you can see the current increase in infections, which is much higher than the infection rate 1 year ago around this time. And right below that, you see the current number of deaths per day, which are much lower than 1 year ago at this time. Before anybody interprets what I just said as suggesting that I think it's okay that people are dying of coronavirus, that's not my message. I am looking at the data. I am just stating a fact in the data. My family and I are doing everything that we think is reasonable to protect ourselves and our own loved ones. And I imagine everyone's doing the same thing. I don't care to see anybody die of COVID-19. The numbers, however, may suggest that what the governor told us he was trying to do is happening. Regarding your authority as a board, you do in fact have the authority to impose restrictions in the school. Stakeholders have the right to not like them, regardless of what you choose to do or not do. There have been some legal challenges. There have actually been a number of legal challenges to boards arguing that mask mandates shouldn't exist, and so far those legal challenges have not been successful. School board's authority to make these decisions has been upheld by courts, again, so far. Likewise, there have not been successful legal challenges to this point, asserting that school boards that fail to provide adequate mitigation are then somehow liable if students or others in the school end up getting sick. In other words, whatever you decide to do, you appear to have the authority to do it. You are not bound so far by any decision in the courts to a particular course of action. The Department of Health and Human Services school toolkit that was released last August, which has been revised a number of times even after we've implemented some of the mitigation that they suggested. They've then changed the document, so not everything we're doing is consistent with their recommendations now, even though it may once have been. It does still say this, though, that schools and child care programs can recommend or require face masks, and that you should decide with your community how to implement face coverings to prevent introduction and spread of COVID-19. So here's a recommendation, and it's really for the purposes of your discussion as much as anything. You could begin planning, I could begin planning, we could begin planning on your behalf to start eliminating mitigation measures in January. Why? Well, anyone who wants to be vaccinated has had the opportunity to be fully vaccinated by then. Anybody who wishes to wear face coverings may do so. And if you chose to have us work in that direction, we would work towards face coverings becoming entirely optional in the school. They'd be allowed, of course. They could be encouraged. Lunches could return from classrooms to the cafeteria. You may not be comfortable with that, but we could consider that. And we could start removing sneeze guards and plexiglass and other physical barriers to the degree that we're using them. We could make athletic contests, which are not part of the core program of the school. They are an elective. We could eliminate restrictions around athletics. At that time, I'm going to come back to the date. I've written a date here, but I'll come back to that in a minute. At the same time, we would keep certain protocols in place. Students who are household and non-household close contacts would continue to follow the DHHS guidance. Now, we know what it is today. We don't necessarily know what that guidance will be in January. It could change. At the moment, non-household close contacts would wear face coverings for 14 calendar days. That's already what's being recommended. Vaccinated household close contacts would wear face coverings for 14 calendar days. Again, already what's recommended. And unvaccinated household close contacts would be asked to quarantine for 10 days. Again, already, currently, what DHHS is recommending. We would continue to have anybody with symptoms of illness stay home or have a negative COVID test result. And just one note with regards to the mandate on school buses, we can't really do anything about that, although at the moment, I think it's still slated to expire on January 15th, but could certainly be extended again. But again, that would be done by the federal government and would really have nothing to do with you. So to the date, based on the availability of vaccines, starting with children aged 5, you could justify January 1st, I think, but based on, anecdotally, that some people have had a hard time scheduling those appointments as quickly as they would have liked to. January 15th, 16th, and 17th are a long weekend. I know some other school districts that have selected this date with a similar plan, and I would describe this as aspirational as opposed to a policy decision, and that is, if this is something you're interested in, how I would communicate it to the community. But by communicating now, there's the opportunity for the community to adapt, understanding that, okay, this could happen if I've been planning to get my children vaccinated and just haven't gotten around to it. Maybe it's time for me to go do that. I can keep an eye on the local and regional data like we all check, or I check quite frequently on the DHHS website to make decisions about what I want my child to do when this day comes, whenever it ends up being. And then if there are families with concerns about severe vulnerabilities, they could contact my office to discuss options for them. You have one luxury this year. It's about time. And that is, you don't really need to make a final decision here about the future right now. I'm not recommending any change to what the school's doing today. I think the school should come back tomorrow and do what it did today. This is about the future. You have a meeting in January prior to Tuesday, January 18th. You can really make a decision then. But if you're interested, if you want to have this conversation, maybe just for a change of pace, if nothing else, I would ask that you have me start communicating with parents and guardians for all the reasons I just talked about. So that is what I have for you this evening.
Thank you, Tim. What would happen if we go into outbreak status again?
We'd have to make a decision about that.
Is that
It's-
is that our protocol, or is that the state's protocol that they're?
The DHHS is not requiring schools to do anything in particular.
Okay.
DHHS recommended that if you have an outbreak, you have universal masking during the outbreak. DHHS has recommended that if you have a rate of new cases per 100,000 in your county of over 100, you have a universal mask mandate. There are few schools that have consistently followed that recommendation throughout this school year.
And hasn't DHHS changed their protocol for what an outbreak is a few times?
DHHS appears to change things
Like,
quite often.
how many considered to be an
I-
outbreak one
I-
month compared to the next?
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca,
Just for the record.
how on November 10th DHHS decided we had an outbreak with 11 cases is a bit beyond me, based on what they had told us previously
Right.
about how they were
When there were
making that
several
decision.
more in earlier months, correct.
We're not the only ones either, I'm sorry, Karen, but we're not the only ones. I've talked to other superintendents who have had, over the course of the fall, similar experiences with decisions being a little different than we thought
Well,
we
I
had
go
been
on
told.
periodically and see the updates
Yeah.
that they provide for like the teacher calls that they have, and there's been a few revisions.
I mean, just another example, and I'm not complaining, it's been an evolving situation for nearly 2 years now, so, you know, you could go back to something that I wrote and released to the public 18 months ago and make fun of me for it. So I'm not complaining. It is the case, however, that last spring, we had guidance that suggested that things like sneeze guards and plexiglass barriers were acceptable mitigation in lieu of face coverings in certain situations. This fall, when a bunch of schools, in addition to ours, started using those systems, DHHS changed that guidance and told us not to do it anymore after we had already done it.
And
That's
spent
frustrating.
all the money on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Grant funds. from-
Grant money, but nevertheless, those are grant dollars that could have gone somewhere else. It's frustrating. It's been frustrating.
Tim, with respect to the last outbreak, I recall that you mentioned that part of their decision to declare it an outbreak may have had to do with, they thought another cluster was starting to generate, and they were looking at what was going on at other schools, because obviously they have more information about what they're seeing happening in other schools. So that, I'm assuming that was part of the
It's
decision
possible.
process.
Yeah, they might have been thinking about other schools in the region. I don't know that, but yeah, that's possible.
I think it's, given the access to the vaccine for the 5 and older, I think it's definitely a conversation to have about having the masks being optional. I mean, if they're getting vaccinated, why not have the masks optional? For families that want a mask or that they want their children masked, that's great. And for people that don't, then they would have that choice.
Is that a motion, Ann, before we all start arguing?
What would you like the motion to be? Do we want to discuss it now, discuss it at the next meeting? I mean, I don't know.
I think maybe make the motion to start the communication with the
Right.
community and then
I-
revisit
On the next meeting?
to make a final decision.
I don't know, we
or-
know what to communicate if we're not.
Yeah, we do need to take, like, even if it's not a vote, like sort of a straw poll to give Tim, you know, we basically need to give Tim guidance as to what direction, so it might be worth making the motion tonight and voting, and then just noting that we're gonna revisit that next month also.
Could we have
Okay.
more discussion before we?
Yeah,
took
but
on
usually
motions?
it's motion, second, and then discussion, so we'll,
So
Yeah.
I will make a motion that, we move to entirely optional masks, starting in January 18th.
And I'll second.
okay, discussion.
My first question is if we are considering a turn in our decision-making based on vaccination for the younger children, are we planning to do some kind of survey to determine what level of vaccination we have in the school to even know if it's relevant to our mitigation in the school?
I don't think we're allowed to.
No, and I don't think we did that with the high school, so
No.
I mean.
Well, we certainly could
it's-
do a voluntary survey to get an idea of vaccination rates. Otherwise, we don't really know if there's a rate that would be enough to cause a difference in the transmission in the school of younger children being vaccinated.
Do we have a rate for the high school?
We
We have a
don't,
guess.
we never did.
No, and I think it's always been, that they've had the option to. And that's, I think the bottom line is there's always been the access to a vaccine. There's always, for high school students, well, I think it was 16 and above, they've had access to vaccinations. And now that a 5-year-old would have access to a vaccination, that's, I think, more of the
Yeah, I think that's what
focus.
we've been saying
I think
all
that's more of
along,
the
right?
focus than actually looking at hard numbers, because that, you start to get into a lot of HIPAA and privacy issues, and I don't really think that that's ever been our focus. I think we've always tried to focus on who has had access. And I know for me personally, that's always, that was the main stumbling block with the elementary school versus the high school students.
Well, and I think if there's a close contact at the high school, they have to reveal they're vaccinated or they stay home. I
Yeah.
think that's been the rule that's been happening. At least
Yeah,
that's my
There's
experience.
no privacy, and Tim can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no privacy,
If there's a,
yeah.
yeah.
Right,
For
so,
this particular,
but I would also emphasize that these are conversations with our nurses, so they are still
Yeah.
confidential conversations.
Right.
But once somebody has either tested positive or been identified as a close contact, our nurses are able to ask about their vaccination status, because the answer to that question then routes them down the flow chart from DHHS about what they need to do next.
Right.
I think with the high school, we did informally sort of ask students and parents to let the nurse know if they were vaccinated, just so she would have a sense of it, but I don't think there was
It was
formal
voluntary.
survey, just kind
It
of
was definitely voluntary.
a sense of it.
Yeah, it was entirely voluntary, and she has a guess about a vaccination rate at the school, but that's all it is. It's a guess. But I would also
But-
point out that our experience in terms of cases at the high school has been pretty, it's
Yeah,
been
I
a
was
pretty
gonna say, I've been
smooth
really
sailing
pleased with
so
how it
far.
went there.
Right, but also, as far as my understanding of the superintendent's decision-making process, that has been one of the silos in the low, medium, or high risk levels. So, whether the vaccination state is low or high has always been my understanding that that's part of his decision process. Is that correct or incorrect?
If I had better access to information, it could be more of a factor. DHHS suggests that institutions aspire to a vaccination rate of 80% of people in the building. But
Well, clearly,
DHHS doesn't provide a way for us to
clearly
know
a-
that.
We're clearly around a 50 to 60% rate in the town, and the state is not effective. I mean, we can see that in the numbers clearly now. So I guess my question is, why wouldn't we want to have as much information as we could about what the risk levels are in the school? Because we need to weigh that with what else is going on as far as the rates. It's one of the factors to consider, right along with whether our HVAC system is working properly. Those are still considerations, whether people can be vaccinated or not, that relate to the fact that COVID is still spreading. So I think we would want to gather as much information as we could.
I think we've gathered so much information that it's become cross-eyed. I just feel like there's so much information, and it just.
I think we should let the superintendent start the
Yeah.
process of communicating with the public about.
Yes, I agree.
I think it should be on
Let
you,
him
Tim.
communicate. I would like to see how we do right after the holidays. I think oftentimes we have outbreaks, but
Yeah.
I'm feeling so much better that the kids are able to be vaccinated. That makes me feel better as a school board member, knowing that there's protection there, before.
Right, I feel like all along that's been the biggest concern for the elementary level, and now
Right.
we're there. I think we should move forward. There's going to be variants for the rest of our lives, unfortunately, for COVID, and it's just going to keep happening, and we're never gonna get out of this mask versus vaccine, not vaccine mess. We have to, people want the vaccine, they trust in the vaccine, I think it's available and we need to start moving forward.
And if people wanna wear a mask by all means.
A couple of thoughts. One is, you know, Tim, if you would find it useful to do an anonymous survey, or John, I don't think that's a bad idea for both schools, really. You know, I don't think any of us would want that not to happen, if you find it useful.
No, information's good, and we will certainly try to, whatever we can learn is helpful. There are just limits, and there seem to be more and more limits to what we actually know and don't know in these situations. It has become more rather than less frustrating over time.
And then I'd just like to put, I am in favor of working towards the optional optional masking. I just think it's worked really well at the high school. I've been really, really surprised and pleased by that. But keeping in mind that our overall goal is not to close the school. So our overall goal is to keep school open for kids and to make sure that we're not getting staff members I know are getting sick with breakthrough cases if they haven't been boosted yet. And I just want to encourage everybody to keep in mind that that's our goal, is really keep school open and to do all we can to be able to give the kids a place to come to school.
I agree.
There are districts in New Hampshire that are seriously looking at closing school right now, so you know, it's definitely a real threat.
I think that's very important also, and I think that's also why it's important to take into the context where we are in transmission levels in the state. I mean, right now we're at record highs for New Hampshire. We're leading the country in case rates, and we're overrunning our hospitals right now, which not only affects people who are unvaccinated or having breakthrough cases who are in the hospital, is also affecting anybody who has to have any type of surgery or care in hospitals. So, you know, there's a bigger picture to look at, I think, because we are gathering many people in a public space indoors, whether they're whatever percent is vaccinated is going to influence that, of course, but we're still creating a source of community transmission, and we should keep that in mind if transmission rates are high, based on everything else going on in the community. I believe that talking about a certain date in January is very presumptive right now, based on the rates that we're seeing now and based on the fact that it's the middle of winter when that's happening. I would really like to see us not set a particular date that we communicate to parents, but again, say what we've been saying all along, that we're basing this information on what the conditions actually are in the community and what the conditions are around us in the state, since we can't escape from that. So I would like to, well, I guess we need to vote on the motion that's on the table first. But I would propose, if this motion does not carry, that we look at a motion that does not set a particular date in the motion. In particular, because we're talking about looking at the conditions that we would see after the holiday break, and we're also talking about having the superintendent make decisions based on what the conditions on the ground are at the time. So I don't see why we would need to set a particular date for this at this time. We have no idea what that's going to look like in January.
But see, I think with our meeting January 10th, that's going to be a really important meeting where we look at what's happening around the community and the school. So we don't set the date tonight as January 18th, but we say we're going to revisit on the 10th so we can make that decision. But I don't want the parents not to be aware of that. I think the parents need to be aware that we're trying to decide what's best for the kids. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to make a final decision on the 10th. And so therefore they should be giving input to the board, to the superintendent, and Tim can be putting out a survey.
Yeah.
And so to make January 18th tonight, I agree, we shouldn't decide right now, January 18th, but we should decide that we're going to make decisions on January 10th. Do you see the difference?
And in the meantime, I think a survey could go out between then and now, and then we can review that on the meeting of the 10th. But yes, I agree. I think the communication should begin.
I do think we need to start talking to parents about it because, you know, now they have the opportunity to vaccinate. Some parents don't want to. They're nervous about, you know, small children having that. but people are nervous about the measles vaccine too. And we've had this happen over the years with vaccinations where some people choose not to vaccinate their kids. They do, and that's their choice.
Absolutely.
And New Hampshire is a state where you do have that choice, so
Right,
there's kids
exactly.
that go to school with no vaccinations at all.
right.
Keeping in mind that vaccination cycle is 6 weeks, so I agree with Carol, we really need to prep parents as much as possible.
Right.
Okay, we ready?
Well,
So what are we voting on? Can I ask?
does the motion include the January 18th date? As far as I recall, you set,
What if we call it a suggested date, but make it clear to parents that we will revisit in January?
At the
Yeah.
board meeting, yeah.
Mhm.
I think the positive of the January, date sort of sets a,
Sets a goal.
immediacy.
Mhm.
Right.
So that it's, we're talking about next month, we're
Well, I
not
know
talking about.
the children that are getting vaccinated this week, the next shot, I think, is January 7th. And then they have how many weeks before they're
14 days.
14 days?
So,
So the 18th may not be realistic in that respect. I know that parents have signed up for I know my own grandchild is getting vaccinated on Friday, and then he'll have his second shot on January 7th. He's 9. So you figure at that point, 14 days after that is beyond the 18th, so we really do need to look at that, based on that vaccination clinic. Maybe we need a later date, do you see?
it seems to me kind of like what we're kind of circling around to is, that we want to communicate to parents that due to the availability of vaccines and hopefully having an idea of what that percentage is in the school, that is going to allow the board to look at more options to reduce mitigation in the school at some point in January. We want parents to be aware of that.
Right.
Because we're really not changing the fact that the superintendent is looking at a variety of information and we have different mitigation levels, just that we're going to have more available on our plate as far as information and mitigation, meaning higher levels of vaccination that will come into that decision. So people should be aware that that really is just going to be coming more into play in the decision process in January. Seems like what we're talking about.
So I've lost track of the motion. What am I voting on?
I think Tim's got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we don't
Okay.
need to, we don't
All
need
right.
to vote?
Well,
No, we do need to vote.
but what is the motion actually? Because I
So I'll
think
tell you what I
Ann-
have.
Ann, I think
Alright, tell
Ann's
me
What
motion
I
was
have
optional masking
is
as of
that
January 18th.
you authorized me to start communicating with parents and guardians and other stakeholders here that the board is considering removing mitigation maybe as soon as January 18th, depending on the situation at that time. And this is largely based on the availability of vaccination down to age 5.
Yep, that sounds good.
that sounds good, I agree.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. All right, Dawn, principal's report.
That's a tough act to follow.
Yeah, but please do.
Just, my report's pretty much as noted. I did want to, again, extend congratulations to all of our band and chorus students for a truly awesome performance last week. Both directors were extremely creative and have worked so hard after everything from, last year to actually be able to have something and to be the quality that it was last week. It was definitely heartwarming and very well received. So huge thanks to them. I mentioned in here, this is a pretty proud moment. Our student teacher that was working with Mr. Nevu, we were trying to land him as a sub before he left the. Obviously, we have a sub shortage. We were trying to land him as a sub. We were just about to do so, and the folks down at Souhegan High School snagged him, and he's got a gig for the rest of the year, which is a dream gig. So huge congratulations to Mr. Giles on getting that. It's as a former band director, it's always great to see when you have a student teacher that is, before they're even done, hired. It's just it's a great thing. So congrats to him. Other things going on today are our little Google form went out to students to choose for after-school enrichments. Some of the things being offered are everything from string art and coloring club and yarn art to jewelry making and fun with friends, which are indoor and outdoor games, crochet, and book club for grades 5 through 8 are just some of the ones that we're offering that hopefully students sign up for. We actually have a community member doing a beading one that is not a staff member here. So people are noticing, and that's a really good thing to get more community in. I did notice I did make note on my report. I don't usually do this, but we are still looking for, so if anyone out there is definitely, into theater and is willing to come up to Alton, we are certainly looking for a drama coach willing to do that, because I know there's the interest here. We just need to have someone run it.
John, have you reached out to the local community theater groups, specifically to them, not just the paper, or you have?
Yeah, and I have actually, and I would add that I know where we are, but the high school has the same situation right now. So if there were someone or some qualified people who wanted to run a middle high school play production, I'm sure we could entertain something like that. Right now, the challenge is finding someone. I have spoken with some people who are active in theater who just aren't available at the moment for a variety of reasons.
I've even reached out to my nephew, who's a theater major right now. I mean, reaching out anywhere and everywhere we can. It's times are tough. I mean, it's.
And just to be clear, there is a stipend with that position, correct?
It's a paid position.
Yes, absolutely. The only other thing I wanted to say that's not in my report is I did want to thank the folks once again at Prospect for letting our music program so generously use the auditorium space for the performance. It was a great night. Everything, it just went really well.
We heard good things about it.
And I got to play with the kids too, which is always tons of fun for me. So,
Thank you.
and that's that.
You also have a facilities report in your packet. Okay. On to action items. We have support staff handbook.
So the proposed change is to health insurance availability under category 3 on page 5.
Can you describe the change? I see the wording here, but what was the before?
Yep, it's based on a previous discussion. Yeah, before there wasn't any available, and this is in order to come into full compliance with federal law.
Okay.
So I would make a motion that we accept the proposed changes to the support staff handbook.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. FY '23 warrant articles.
Hopefully we'll have some more specific information. Do you need us to move those to?
So we're, well, you can't do all of it. We are with the Alton Budget Committee next, this Thursday, the 16th.
Yeah,
All these days.
couple days from.
Pile right up on top of each other. So we will finish with the Budget Committee maybe that night, maybe another meeting or
12
two, who
months,
knows,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But SB2 deadline is January 7th, so your worst case scenario is you need to conduct some kind of a vote that week. This probably happened before.
Ask Karen, this is my first rodeo.
You,
I don't know.
The budget committee is usually generally pretty accepting that we've gone through a lot of work already on the school budget, and, you know, there's a lot for them if they had to go through all the details. So I think usually it's settled in one meeting.
so if you, certainly if you want to act on all of these at the same time, you're gonna have to act on the operating budget sometime at least after Thursday anyway. You could do that, but in the spirit of no surprises, here they are, so read, review, think about how you feel.
Well, maybe after Wednesday and Friday, we'll have more information on contracts.
Maybe, the 7th is the same night as our prospect meeting?
So your prospect meeting is on the 4th?
Oh, the 4th.
Yep.
So maybe we could do
But there's an
something in
opportunity for you to do
conjunction
something,
with
yeah,
that meeting.
you could do that.
That'd be great.
That'd be fine with me.
So
Yep.
in the meantime, does anybody have any objections or comments on the warrant articles? Great. Okay. And then the personnel report.
I move we accept the co-curricular stipends as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Uh, We have our second session of public input.
So Karen, you weren't here yet, but I also, while New Hampshire is the leading cases currently in case rates and our mediocre vaccination levels, like I said before, it's around 55 to 65, depends on the source you're looking at. CDC and New Hampshire have different numbers, but it's also important to know that Vermont is the most vaccinated state in the country at around 76%, and they're experiencing the same caseload. They're number 2 as far as the rates of COVID is concerned. But there's a couple other things that I'd like to point out too. That the NBA is 97% vaccinated. It is currently experiencing a outbreak. I guess they're all breakthrough cases. And in order for the other 3%, they don't get to play. In order to go into Boston to see a Celtics game, you need to have a vaccination card, and you also need to show that you are negative COVID test within 24 hours of going to the game. I'd also like to point out that a Norwegian cruise line with the same similar guidelines had to pull off into a port in New Orleans because they experienced a COVID outbreak. So COVID's not going to go away. And I think that it's really important, too, that the community understands a couple things that were just suggested right now. So we're going to send out a survey to see what you guys feel like as far as whether or not we should have the option to mask our children or not mask our children. Well, in May, you guys did a survey, about 249 people.
Jason, could I clarify? The survey is to determine which families were planning to vaccinate their kids. Anonymous survey.
Right, but that's going to be based on your decision. That's going to help your decision process, right? Okay. So you interrupt me, but don't want to communicate. So anyways, in May, 14% wanted their kids vaccinated. You asked again in August, and 14%, that number, that ratio never changed. And 450 people around actually communicated that in the beginning of the school year, that only 86 or 14% wanted their kids masked. So right now, where the suggested date is January 18th. I'd also like to make sure that the community understands that I believe January 14th, people are going to be able to register for local elections. And in March, we're going to be able to have a town election. So it's really important for us to understand that this authority that they appear to have could be changed if we change the board. And that's something that I would support in promoting policies that would restrict the board's authority over our children's bodies unless if you get the consent of the community. So when you have 86% of the community saying that they don't want their children masked, that would actually be the consent of the community.
Jason, your time is up.
I know, but she interrupted me, so I'm kind of a little lost right now. I must also say, too, that this man right here is a very rude individual. I do not get into any name calling with anybody. I do not have anything personally with you, wrong with you, Carol. Do you hear this? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is just rude.
Your time is up.
This is rude. He's been like this the whole time.
Jason.
The whole time.
I recall you interrupting me when I was speaking before.
Because you insulted me,
I didn't
Steve.
insult you.
You insulted
No, I
me.
didn't. I said anyone who something, I don't know.
Yeah,
It wasn't
exactly.
directed at you.
You don't know.
All right, folks, thank you for the time again. Pam said something, the overall goal is such and such. And I really want to remind folks that it's not just a goal, it's a duty to protect the kids, okay? And I want to touch on something that Mr. Broderick said about the legal challenges that have been going on. There have been many legal cases brought forth by individuals that believe the same as Mr. English, that mask mandates are not legal. Those have all been defeated. I don't believe, however, there's been any lawsuits brought, at least my attorney hasn't found any lawsuits about people forcing schools and school boards to wear masks. I don't believe there have been any. There was, however, something in Tennessee last Friday in federal court. And it was basically disabled children, of which I have one. And the thing is that it was talking about accommodations in the school, making accommodations because of the school board was not allowed to put in a mask mandate. So the thing is that, you know, that there is some legal issues to be worked out there. The school does also have liability. Regardless of what your opinion is on that, I would highly suggest you bring that across to the lawyer, because, to be honest, my attorney feels differently. And the thing is that if you're not standing the sidewalks, what's going to happen? If you have all available information and you don't provide appropriate risk mitigation and something happens, do you really don't think you're liable? So, you know, I'd just like you to think about that. And the last thing I'll say is we have school resource officers all over the state. They do a great job. Do you know how many shooting deaths we've had in New Hampshire? 1 by suicide. But we put in those risk mitigation factors. And we're not going to do these risk mitigation factors. I think the January 18th date is highly premature until we're on another downslide. I'm not against getting rid of masks. I hate them. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Steve. All right, closing public input. And do you mind if we do future agenda items before we go into non-public?
Sounds good.
We have, obviously we'll be discussing this again in January, COVID. We have goal setting on the agenda and strategic planning, which I think is great. Tim's thinking about starting up some strategic planning. Tim's thinking about finding enough time to start up some strategic planning. I would just recommend, as far as board goals go, that we shift board goals until April, after the election cycle happens. It seems like a good starting point for our cycle. Anything else for future agenda items?
No, I think those are good suggestions.
Okay.
Oh, and I just wanted to request of Tim, if it's possible, could you include your superintendent report in the packet ahead of time? I think would be helpful. I know you're a busy guy.
I can when it exists.
I know you're a busy guy, but, you know, even if it's not completely done, it would be great to have some kind of preview of the superintendent report as part of the packet. Thank you.
Okay, and, need a motion to go into non-public. The RSAs are on your blue sheet here.
Make a motion to go into non-public, RSA dash A,
91?
91 dash A, sorry, I can't even
all right.
read tonight. 91 dash A, 2, is that a 1 or an I? 1B. And 91 dash A, 3, 2, K.
Second.
I second that motion. All right, by roll call, Ann?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Karen? Yes. Yes.